The honourable member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first off, I just want to express sort of my disappointment for having to be here tonight to readdress a simple question, really, and it's a question of transparency and openness from the government on lessons learned from the fall of Kabul last year. So the first thing I want to read again into the record, Mr. Speaker, is actually what the mandate of the Special Committee on Afghanistan was to do. It was to conduct hearings to examine and review the events related to the fall of Afghanistan to the Taliban, including, but not limited to, the government's contingency planning for the event and the subsequent efforts to evacuate or otherwise authorize entry to Canada of Canadian citizens and interpreters, contractors, and other Afghans who had assisted the Canadian Armed Forces or other Canadian organizations. So that was our mandate. I'm going to read you the definition in the Defense Terminus database of what an after-action review is. It's a professional discussion of an operational event that focuses on identifying what happened, why it happened, and how it can be improved. So in reality here, we're asking for the same thing, is just to get those after-action reviews. I put a motion forward, Mr. Speaker, in the Special Committee on Afghanistan for the government. We brought it up during the testimony when we had Global Affairs Canada officials admit that they had conducted an after-action review or a review of what happened last summer in Kabul. After that, we had defense officials there, including the Chief of Defense Staff. They admitted they went through the Canadian Armed Forces after-action review process or post-operational review, conducted that, and in fact, they'd fed into a PCO-led interdepartmental review of what went right, what went wrong, what we need to improve going forward from last summer. All great stuff. Made sense. Considering the mandate of the Special Committee of Afghanistan, wouldn't that documentation, that information be invaluable to our hardworking analysts to help put together, and the committee members to put together the report? So I put that motion forward. I asked the officials, unfortunately we didn't get the information, put it forward at committee. Unfortunately, the Liberal members of the committee decided to filibuster, never got to a vote before we ran out of time because, as you know, the Special Committee on Afghanistan is wrapping up. In fact, we are going to the chair will table the report tomorrow. Now, on every possible avenue, I've submitted an order paper question, a written question to get in there to see if I can get the information that way. And then I stood up here in question period, Mr. Speaker, which brings me here tonight to ask that information. And again, just looking to get all those reports, any of the draft reports, into the committee so we can move forward. Because lacking that, Mr. Speaker, I mean, it was obvious. Based on the testimony, interdepartmental coordination between the three departments that were involved here, particularly with respect to the immigration, was weak, if non-existent, and the committee was unable to get all those reports to provide that effective response going forward. And this is really the key point, Mr. Speaker, that I want to hit at. In the end, this is all about setting the conditions for the future. So if Canada ever commits, whether it's military or diplomatic, to another mission around the globe, that we can rely upon those cultural advisors, those interpreters, those linguists that are willing to step forward. Because if they are unwilling or, don't trust us to have their back if things go sideways like they have done in Afghanistan, we're the ones that will lose out of this. We're going to hear from likely the Parliamentary Secretary. I'm glad that he's here to answer the question or to speak back, Mr. Speaker. However, I think he's going to use national security as an excuse, which isn't the case. And ultimately, Mr. Speaker, the sad reality is those Afghans that should be getting out here that are the losers in this whole circumstance. Thanks, Mr.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my colleague and fellow member of the Special Committee on Afghanistan for the opportunity to speak on this important topic. I also want to thank him for his service to Canada and can say that his contributions at committee were very insightful and always insightful. Canada's response to the collapse of the Afghan government and the Taliban's seizure of power in August 2021 was one of the largest, most challenging and complex international crisis operations in recent decades. It involved the first Canadian-led non-combatant evacuation operation since the 2006 operation in Lebanon. Through close cooperation with our international partners, we supported and continue to support eligible individuals wanting to leave Afghanistan. Following the signing of the Doha Agreement in February 2020, Canada began to prepare for a worsening security situation. We closely monitor events on the ground, informed by intelligence agencies and partners. Mr. Speaker, coordinated contingency planning for a potential closure of the Embassy of Canada in Afghanistan and an evacuation of Canadians began early between Global Affairs Canada and the Department of National Defence. The security of Canadians in Afghanistan was one of the utmost priority. As testimony from officials made clear at committee, even with the best efforts on assessments from the field, the Taliban overtook Kabul far more quickly than anticipated. I can tell my colleague that departments and ministers work closely together across government for a coordinated response. Starting in July 2021, daily interdepartmental task force calls took place to ensure collaboration between departments. From the Global Affairs Canada perspective, our consular team went into high gear to provide robust consular support to Canadians, permanent residents, and their family members in Afghanistan to facilitate their safe passage to Canada. This effort required coordinated support from the embassy in Kabul as they themselves prepared to close down operations in precarious security situation, as well as from Ottawa and from 8 of our missions across the globe. From the onset of this crisis, surge capacity responders work around the clock to manage an unprecedented volume of answering calls and emails from Canadians, permanent residents, members of Parliament, family members outside of Afghanistan, as well as vulnerable people in Afghanistan seeking help and advice. Across the government, hundreds of employees worked together on the coordinated response efforts. Partner departments were embedded in Global Affairs Canada's Operations Centre, enabling close collaboration amongst departments. At the same time, support was provided to Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada to enable them to carry out their mandate in resettling Afghan nationals in Canada. Mr. Speaker, while the response to the crisis in Afghanistan remains ongoing, we always review our efforts in order to identify and capture lessons learned and best practices to improve future emergency management capabilities. We are committed to continuing to work together to implement the lessons learned in order to better serve Canadians' interests abroad. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Bruce-Grey-Owen Sound.
Well, thanks, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Parliamentary Secretary for recognizing my service. And I mean, I do think it was beneficial, a lot of the information that we found at the Special Committee of Afghanistan. I won't thank him for the history lesson, although I think maybe it was beneficial to yourself, Mr. Speaker, for learning what we just studied over the last number of months at the Afghanistan Committee. My question is, why won't the government release the reports that would have made our job so much easier on committee, especially the great analysts? So my question's simple, Mr. Speaker, to conclude here, to go back to the Parliamentary Secretary. Would he not agree that it would have made the analyst's job so much easier? And he doesn't have to trust me. I actually asked them this yesterday, and they agreed with me. It would have made their job a lot easier if they would have had the benefit of seeing all the work that was done already. So why won't the government release the reports?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has supported and continues to support the people of Afghanistan. Through the coordinated efforts of our government, more than 1,460 Canadian permanent residents and their family members were able to safely return to Canada. Emergency consular services continue to be offered to Canadians 24/7 through the Emergency Watch and Response Centre at Global Affairs Canada. In addition, Canada continues to work closely with neighbouring countries to ensure the safe travels of Afghans to Canada under resettlement programs. To date, more than 14,600 Afghan nationals have arrived as a result of these efforts. As we continue to support those in need, it is clear that there's always room for improvement when it comes to collaboration across government departments. I know that our work on the Special Committee for Afghanistan will help contribute to this process, and I can assure my colleagues and all Canadians that the government will be providing a complete response to the report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank members for their